Welcome back to another episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. Joining me today is Jaeda Skye Cohen. Jaeda is a social media entrepreneur, and I really loved the chat that we had on this episode today. We kind of go over a lot of different things as it relates to social media in the health and fitness space. I certainly learned a lot from Jaeda, and I know you will too. Be sure to check her out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can check the links below in the description to get access to all of that. This episode and every episode in season 5 is sponsored by Isophit, my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on that, check out the links below for Isophit and their founder, Brad Thorpe. Enjoy. Jaeda, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited.
For people who might not be familiar with you, or maybe they haven't seen your incredible Instagram page or TikTok page, or maybe they haven't seen your new media agency, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the amazing things that you do day in and day out?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Jaeda. If you know me from social media, it's usually Jaeda Skye. Skye's my middle name, which I kind of add on to most things. It just makes it a little more unique because I spell it Skye. So I consider myself a content creator, influencer, social media consultant. I like to say the 360 view of social media, kind of everything behind the scenes to in front of the camera to editing to creative directing. And then I kind of weave in a little entrepreneurship in there. So I like to say I'm a social media entrepreneur because I've always been kind of like that business mindset. So I kind of tie everything in there. I'm currently a college student, so I'm a senior at James Madison University. My major is a bit of a funny one. It's called Independent Scholars. So it's an interdisciplinary major. I started out as kinesiology, physical therapy. I actually shadowed at True Sports when I was first interested in PT school. My brother went to True Sports. He's a baseball player. And so I said, hey, can I shadow your PT? So that's how I first got connected to actually True Sports. And my mom's also a physical therapist. So lots of physical therapy influence and always thought that's what I wanted to do. So I came to college, started out in that, realized I really liked the health field, but PT wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. My freshman year was kind of COVID year. So I was on campus, but basically in my dorm 24/7, masks constantly, weren't allowed to be more than 2 or 3 people at a time. And I started some TikTok social media stuff. And that's kind of when I realized that I really, really liked that. And then slowly kind of started putting more energy into that and realized maybe PT wasn't quite where I wanted to be. So then I switched my major from kinesiology to independent scholars, kept the physical therapy minor, and then added on a business minor and a media minor. So kind of a combination of a lot of the things I'm interested in. And that way I was able to take classes in still like, the chemistry, bio, that kind of health field, but then also adding on the business classes to help with get into it later, but future agency that I wanted to start. And then also allowed me to study abroad in London, where I got a media minor and got to work at a fashion PR firm and kind of all that kind of stuff. So a bit of a weird major that people haven't heard of, but I'm super excited that I found that. And so that's kind of where I am now in a little introduction.
Yeah, that's impressive. It seems like you've kind of done a little bit of everything. And I really like how, a lot of people, they feel like they have to have everything figured out. And sometimes you go into life and you just start in a general direction and you find yourself as you go down it. So I really love that. And I really love how you're open-minded enough to kind of, start down one direction and say, hey, actually, I really like this content creation piece. And it's interesting because I see so many people, PTs amongst them, but really doctors, athletes, strength coaches, chiros, a lot of different, health-oriented individuals are really trying to grow and build on the social media side. That's something I see a lot of people struggling with. And it sounds like that's kind of your specialty, and you have a little bit of that background from the PT side, from, your family, but also your early interest there. As far as the social media stuff goes, just breaking it down for, those of us like myself who are not quite as savvy with it as you are, would you mind just kind of breaking us down like Instagram and TikTok and all these different trendy forms of media and, what goes into each one?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say the main two right now, kind of also looking at a, new and up and coming and almost like a Gen Z kind of perspective. I'd say TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube are really the three main big ones that I'd say are part of my everyday life, more like 24/7 kind of thing. and I think are really the platforms to grow on and also monetize. So to kind of break down each one, so Instagram obviously has been around for most of my life, and kind of like people started with more, still pictures. And I think that's definitely still very present. I think it's getting a little bit more, I guess, saturated with kind of like influencer kind of people using it to build their brand instead of just like a sharing your life type thing. Comparing that to TikTok, I think TikTok is much more natural, much more authentic. If you're comparing the two back and forth, I could give an example of if I'm going to, a brunch with my friends or something, we're going to take some cute pictures there, much more staged, much more posed, and that's going to go to Instagram. Now, a TikTok could be my friend spilling her drink all over and, how much our brunch costed and what we're doing after brunch and, funny little trends kind of thing. And that's going to go more to TikTok, which is going to be a much more like authentic, almost like FaceTiming feel. So if you're watching, someone's content on TikTok, you're going to feel like you're friends with them. You're going to feel like you're FaceTiming them. Like I feel like celebrities, influencers kind of stuff use TikTok to kind of connect with their audience more and get them more engaged because you can, be watching, say, Alex Earl, who's a really big influencer right now. You can be watching her TikTok and be like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm best friends with her. But then you go to her Instagram and you're like, okay, she's like this really cool influencer, kind of like in a whole different like world than I am, and it's a lot less relatable. TikTok's definitely where I think the relatability comes in. YouTube, on the other hand, is I think definitely where people use for monetization. I think there's a lot of potential to make money on YouTube once you kind of grow your platform and get bigger on that. I think there's also a bigger kind of like wider audience to reach on YouTube. I'd say Instagram and TikTok tend to be a little bit more niche, and I'd say their algorithm kind of pumps their your stuff out to, I guess, more people who are like going to relate to your content. Whereas I feel like YouTube, the kind of engagement and comments that I'll get from people are kind of from way more countries, way more age groups, all different like demographics, I guess. I'd say TikTok and Instagram, you kind of find your audience and kind of like encapsulate it into people who are really gonna, watch you for you, and find your content. I think also YouTube, there's obviously more possibilities to make longer form content. And then they actually just added in YouTube Shorts, which is a little bit more like TikTok reel type thing. But YouTube, I think, is also where people are going for like those whole like, 20 something minutes of someone's whole trip or something like that. Whereas TikTok, they'd be breaking it down into different days or even, mornings or evenings. And then Instagram, I think, is a little bit more like captured at one point in time because a lot of that is still pictures. Of course, unless you're talking about Reels, which is much more similar to TikTok.
Gotcha. So essentially, Instagram, from a photo standpoint, is more the professional, like highlight reel of life, so to speak. TikTok is very much the raw, unfiltered, unedited form. YouTube is kind of like a weird combination of both, but it's just blasted out to so much more of a broad audience, almost like the shotgun approach of social media. And then you mentioned Reels being more like Instagram's take on like TikTok videos almost.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think each platform kind of has a way of incorporating like a TikTok feel. I even saw Snapchat just launched a new feature and they have like I don't even know like what they're calling it, but some kind of TikTok reel kind of tab where you can scroll through and like you could post the exact same thing that, you could recycle your content from TikTok. You could be putting it on, I mean, this is what I do. A lot of stuff, I'll film stuff on TikTok. You download that, remove that watermark, and you put it on Instagram Reels. You can put it on YouTube. You can put it on Snapchat. There was an app that kind of stuck around for a couple months, Lemonade. Put it on Lemonade, which that's one that a lot of people haven't heard of, but I think it's kind of dying out a little bit. That was just around when people were scared about TikTok being banned. So yeah, I think each platform serves a different purpose, but there's definitely ways to be recycling your content and take the same activity and make a whole bunch of different content that would appeal more to different apps.
And I'd imagine that saves you a ton of time too, right? That's the most common complaint I hear from people is they say, well, I work 40, 50 hours a week. I have X, Y, and Z going on. I don't have time to do it. But it's like, if you can just make a couple short clips and then post them across all the different platforms, I'd imagine it's quite easy to, post regularly.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's definitely like a big time commitment, but I think if you kind of plan things out and you make the most of different opportunities, like if you're going to we'll use like a brunch example again. Like if you're going to brunch and you're, meeting up with your friends or something, like that couple hour thing that like you could either get no content out of, and there's benefit to just living in the moment. But then there's also, if you really want to be making that content, you could get an Instagram post out of that. You could get 5 different TikToks out of that. You could get a couple trend videos out of that. You could make a whole long form video for YouTube about you going to brunch and the workout you're doing before, and then the errands you're going to run after. So like there's really content opportunities everywhere. And so if you want to make it happen, you just take your life and incorporate the content into your life so you don't have to go out of your way to do stuff.
Exactly. And I mean, if you're going out with your friends already, odds are you're probably going to take a few pictures anyways, right? Like the phone is coming
Exactly.
out at some point. So you might as well use it for something productive instead of just save it from the memory roll in 5 years, right?
Exactly.
No, I love that. You mentioned before about planning too, or you mentioned that a second ago. What goes into like social media content creation, like planning? Like, how do you go about outlining your week, and how do you think others should go about like outlining how they should post on their, platforms during the week?
Yeah, so I think for that kind of planning stuff, there's a lot of potential to planning that could really save you a lot of time. With what I do, so if I know I'm going on a trip, so actually, in 2 weeks I'm going to New York. I'm going to New York Fashion Week, which is super excited. I got invited to a couple events there, which I'm really excited about. But obviously, as you can imagine, there are numerous content opportunities there. And the last thing I want is to walk in there and be like, oh shoot, I don't know what content I need to get. Part of it, yes, is being just very organic and being like, oh, this funny thing happened. Let me make a TikTok. This funny thing happened. Let me, create this thing. I know this will be good for shorts. Oh, this is really good, lighting. Let's take some pictures. Oh, I just ran into Justin Bieber. Let me make this real. But like, you're not gonna be able to plan that stuff out. So I think there's part of like just being like natural and being able to, go with the flow and create things as they come up. But then part of it is like I've already have a separate like TikTok folder, and I'm starting to save things. I just have it labeled New York Fashion Week. And so as I see trends, as I see good ideas, I start saving them to that folder. So then when I'm, on the train on the way there, I can refresh myself, look through those things and be like, okay, when I go to work out tomorrow morning, like here are the things that I'm going to do, like, my pre-workout before Fashion Week. When I'm getting ready tomorrow, like here are the things that I want to do. Oh, this trend's really popular right now. Like, let me make sure that I ask my friend that we need to record that. And then the other thing is like I have a note sheet, like I have a content ideas note sheet that's just pages and pages long. And I'll divide that up into, like different trips. If I know I'm going on a trip and I'm like, all right, here are the things I need to do for, New York Fashion Week. Like, I have a check off list of like, all right, each get ready with me, each outfit thing, each, workout that I'll do while I'm there, different, doing, I'm missing classes, so I'm going to bring some work with me. So talk about, going to these kind of things, but then also being a full-time college student, and kind of keeping that list open and just constant, like, I mean, I can't tell you like how many times like I wake up 3 a.m. and I'm just like, laying there and I'm like coming up with an idea, and biggest mistake I ever made was thinking that I would be able to remember it the next morning. You just don't remember this stuff the next morning. It's like having a dream and you're like, oh, I'm totally gonna remember this when like someone asks about what I dreamt out, and you're like, no, you won't. So I have that content list open on my phone before I go to sleep, so I know if I wake up, I can open my phone, write it down, or I'll even be like, hey Siri, text Jaeda, like text myself. Part of I'm sure we'll get into it later about agency stuff. When I work with different brands and create content for them, I always ahead of time have a content list or a shot list that I'm going to go in, so at least I know that I'm going to walk out with these things filmed, and if other things come up, then I'll add that in. But having that shot list, like, it gives you a lot more confidence walking in, and it also is much more efficient. Like, you can just boom boom boom, check check check, I need you here, I need you here, can we record this? And yeah, so efficiency, but also you're getting more out of it when you do that, because you're not going to think of it, idea later that you're like, oh, I wish I would have written that down before and filmed that.
Right, right. So you come up with your ideas ahead of time, you get a running list of ideas, and it sounds like you get a lot of your ideas off of social media to begin with. And pretty much everyone spends time scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, or whatever every day. So it's like you're already there. Why not just take like 2 seconds, think about what you're watching, and then say, oh yeah, maybe I could make this, or maybe I could make that, or hey, that literally has a CapCut template. I could just click that, throw the videos in, and I've got a post in 5 seconds.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, and especially the trends right now. Like, I think trends are things that like you really save. And then obviously a lot of the stuff that I do, I just come up with in my head. And I think that's also a lot of questions I ask is like, how do you come up with those things? And I think it just, it's like someone who invented some kind of medicine. It's like, how do you come up with that? It's like people just, people are wired differently to be good at different things. And I think I definitely have that kind of creativity. And especially when you're, kind of chronically on this like social media stuff. And, I'm scrolling on TikTok and other people would feel guilty about like spending 4 hours a day on TikTok or something. And I'm like, it's research for me. It's like if I don't know this trend and I'm like, I go to this place and I miss out on doing that trend, then I'm like, well, that's like gonna hurt me. But if I like, was on and like knowing what's up to date, then like that's actually, benefiting me. I think there's obviously a balance. Everything's about balance, but I think, getting that kind of inspiration of trends, but then also, being authentic and like you have to set yourself apart somehow. And so making sure that like you're also coming up with your own ideas and like make that content that like other people are going to save and be like, oh, I'm going to use this girl stuff as like my inspiration. Like I see that all the time. Like I'll have friends that'd be like, oh, that's so a good idea. Can I like use that as like one of my ideas? And I'm like, go for it. Like you want to create like savable and influential content for other people to be able to save, recreate themselves, take their own angle on it. So yeah, lots of different ways to do it.
Definitely. I think you brought up some amazing points. First off, being able to notice the trends and play into the trends, but also maintaining that image of yourself and being authentic while doing so, right? Like, I think we're at the point in social media history or timeline or whatever now where people can smell the bull crap a mile away. And if you're just trying to post stuff and just posting, trying to, play the trend and get a huge following, but you're not actually being you, I feel like people can figure that out in today's day and age. So it's almost like you have to balance, putting your own spin on the things that are getting all the attention in today's day and age. And, on top of that, you mentioned about creating content that is impactful and influential and people want to save it, people want to share it. I mean, ultimately, I think that's where the algorithm rewards you, right? Like the more saves you get and reshares you get, the better your post is going to do. In order to do that, you have to make content that impacts people's lives in a positive way. And if you're not helping them, whether that's helpful content like educational content or entertainment content, then it's probably not going to get that kind of engagement that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's a really good rule. I also tell people, when they're not quite sure like what content to be posting. I think there's a couple categories that you usually want content to fall under. And I mean, it can be different like based off of your niche or, but I think content mainly like falls under a couple of different or umbrella categories, I guess you'd say. And like you just mentioned, I think, educational, informative is kind of one of them. Like are you telling someone about something? Are you informing them something? Are you educating them on something, whether it's a hair routine, a skin routine, a new way to work out, a new way to study, like anything can be, some kind of educational purpose. And then I think the other part is entertainment. Like people just watch social media sometimes to entertain. They don't want to be educated on whatever you're trying to teach them. Sometimes people just want to watch something for fun. And then I think the kind of other thing is also, well, I think there's a couple of different categories, but one of my main categories too is I think like for my own personal like documentation, I think a lot of times people forget that, even, you could have Taylor Swift or something that like you don't really like even think of her almost as a real person. Like she's this like symbol to a lot of people. And I think that like she still has her own life. Like, if she has kids one day or something, that kid that's going to be able to like scroll through her TikTok or scroll through her Instagram and it's like a live diary. Like I think I should get better at journaling. I just am not good at it and like have never really like doing it. And I say social media a lot of times is kind of like digital diary almost. And so like I'll have, when I studied abroad in London, like I'll go through my Be Real, like which is an app that kind of blew up for a little while. And I actually kind of helped them out. It was a campus ambassador for them when it like very, very first came out, which was super cool. But like I'll go through that from London and just look at my Be Reels every day. And I'm like, all right, this isn't really educating anyone. I guess it's entertaining for people to look at. But like for me, I'm like, it's just documenting my life. And I'm excited one day to have that and be like, show my future kids and be like, this was like just a random moment every day when I was in London. Like that's just something cool that I think a lot of people don't think about when, they're looking at social media or they're using social media. It's not like we're using Polaroids as much anymore, printing out, having physical pictures. So, everything I feel like moving forward is a lot of it is online. And so kind of making that digital diary is, another umbrella that I think people don't often think about.
No, I've never thought about it like that before, but that concept of digital diary or, just digital from where you are today to where you end up in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever timeline you put on it, I think that's very powerful and impactful. And, for the health space in particular, that's something that from a content standpoint, you could do that every single day, right? Like there's someone, I forget who, that's doing this right now, where they're actually posting, like every time they see their patient, they're recording the session and they're posting about where they're at. And it's like, well, by the time they're done, like you have from start to finish the entire rehab journey for, you know, whatever condition they're rehabbing. And it's like, that's something that's going to get shared to your future patients. That's going to get saved by other PTs who are like, hey, that's a great idea, I should take that. Like, that's just a genius way to go about it, I think.
Yeah, and I think working out is like almost one of the main like reasons to do that, that kind of documentation. I mean, there's a lot of times like I recently got into more kind of like strength training stuff. Sure, we'll get into it later, but you know, most of my life has been more cardio focused. Um and not a lot of strength. I've had like chronic neck issues my whole life, so I've always been kind of scared of it. And then at some point I was so done with my neck and all the issues, and I was like, well, it's not getting any worse, so I might as well try lifting some weights. And you know, when I first started, I definitely took some videos, and it's funny, you'd think I'd be all over the, you know, picture video stuff, but I was so kind of focused on like concentrating, like making sure like, you know, I was doing the stuff right. And I have some pictures and videos of like when I started, but I think I really wish I took more time to like really document those things, because I feel like now later that I'm like really comfortable with it, I have a lot more like pictures and videos of it. But I think those kind of like fitness journeys of people starting, like that's also, you know, then that's like that educational, you know, relatable content that like you're posting. You're like, here's where I started. Like, here's me. Like I started with 2 pound weights. And then, you know, someone else is sitting there being like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And now it's like, here, now you're all the way up to however many weights that you're like lifting. And you're like, that's a super cool progression that you're able to see. Whereas like on paper, writing that down is not really going to look that cool than having some kind of like transition reel, TikTok, some kind of video that you can actually watch the progression.
Yeah, exactly. You're being completely transparent about your journey doing that, and you never know who you're going to motivate and empower along the way. I think a lot of times we just kind of, as we mentioned before, we focus so much on the highlight reel that sometimes we kind of want to hide some of those things where it's like, well, we weren't always at this point. This is where we used to be, and we try and kind of tuck that to the side instead of like just being open about it, or at least I've found myself there before. It's like, well, you know, I did this today, but that really sucked. It didn't really go like I wanted it to. I'm not going to post that. And maybe in my case anyways, maybe I should be more open and just say, hey, you know, here's what we did, but it didn't go as planned, you know. You mentioned before or a second ago that you were originally kind of more like cardio background, and now you're kind of getting into the strength training, and you incorporate that into, you know, your regular content schedule, for lack of a better way to put it, on TikTok and Instagram and so on that way. What kind of things do you do from a fitness standpoint, and how do you incorporate that into your social media?
Yeah, so I'd say I've always been a very kind of fitness driven person. I think both from a physical standpoint, but also like definitely a mental kind of aspect. I've always been a big advocate for like, you know, mental health and talk therapy. And, you know, I think as much as you work on your physical fitness, I think it plays a huge component into your mental, you know, mental health and all that kind of stuff. So I guess a background on that. So I've been a competitive jump roper my basically whole life. I started in second grade. I started in, actually, I think it was the summer going into second grade. I did a camp. My mom handed me one of our like county camp books, and she's like, "You're doing something this summer. You're doing a camp. I need some me time, and you're going to be in camp." And so, you know, looking through that camp book was, you know, the typical basketball, soccer, you know, all the, you know, kind of core 5, 7 sports that you'd see. And I wasn't overly into that stuff. I did soccer most of elementary school, which was fine. It served to just being active, I guess, kind of, you know, benefit. But then I saw jump rope and I was like, huh, that sounds pretty interesting. And I had a friend at the time who she kind of convinced me to do soccer with her. And so I was like, hey, do you want to do this jump rope camp with me? And she's like, all right, if we do like a soccer camp, I'll do a jump rope camp with you. So I was like, great. So I started doing this jump rope camp, and I was like, this is cool. This is different. I love this. I did, you know, the camp, they have a quite intensive, I feel like, camp for jump rope being like that little, like it was, I don't even, like, I want to say 7 hour days. It could have been less. In my head, it was 7 hours. I don't know if that's right, but in my head, it was 7 hour days for like a straight week as a second grader. That was a
That's a
lot.
lot.
But I loved it. And so after that camp, I signed up for their classes. I started, the team was called Kangaroo Kids, which is based out in Maryland. And so I started that. I joined their regular team. So I'd have my practices every week, and I kind of balanced that with soccer. And then after a few years, I wound up quitting soccer. That one friend, I was like, I think I want to put more energy into jump rope, and she was like, all right, well, I like soccer. So we kind of both, she quit jump rope and what was soccer. I quit soccer and stuck with jump rope. And so there's kind of two divisions within jump rope. There's performance and then competition. And so you start on performance team, and then you can join competition team once you kind of get to a certain level. So eventually I then was on both kind of sides of things. So the performance team would be more like halftime shows, festivals, performed at like UMD halftime shows. We performed for the Harlem Globetrotters. The team's done the Macy's Day Parade. So that's more the performance side of things. And then on the competition side, it's like kind of typical like meets that you think of, like gymnastics competitions or swim meets, that kind of like structured thing, whole day events, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. kind of thing. Usually I compete in like 12 events total. And, each event is only usually a couple minutes each. So those were kind of the two sides of things. And then you kind of work your way up to different competitions, qualify for different things. The most recent competition and kind of the highlight, I feel like, in my jump rope career was a world's competition in Norway, my senior year of high school, which was super, super cool. So those were kind of the two worlds of it. So that's been my whole life. Like jump rope has been just my whole life. I've kind of had to balance that with neck issues. I've just had like weird chronic neck issues that honestly there's not really an explanation for. I've gotten all the MRIs, I've gotten seen all the doctors, done all the tests. It's just kind of like some muscular imbalance, like a little bit of like a flattening my cervical spine. But like, so I've always kind of stayed away from weightlifting, just because of scared I was going to do something to it and make it worse. And then about a year and a half ago, I was talking to my brother, he's a baseball player and he's in college. He plays college baseball, and is definitely very into working out. And he was like, I think you just need to go for it. Like your upper body's just weak. Like you just need to lift something. And I was very reluctant at first. And then I had like a little setback with my neck, and like my setbacks would be like, I wouldn't be able to move for like a week. It was awful. And I was just so done with it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. We were on a family vacation and it like flared up, and I like had to like lay on the couch while we were like in Hawaii. And I was like, I'm done with this. It was like cutting point, like whatever I need to do, I'm doing it. So I was like, let's try lifting these weights. Started doing that. I feel like the form's definitely like hard to nail at first, but I was, lucky enough to have my brother who is really, good at it. And then also develop some relationships with some of the PTs that, I could ask questions to, and which was really great. And like my neck has never been better since. Like that was totally the key to like kind of unlocking that, new fitness side of things. And, I think it also helps you with the kind of discipline side of things, of like being very, regimented. It's something that I didn't enjoy it at first. It was kind of stressful to me and like anxiety producing, because I was scared about I was going to do something with my neck, whereas jump rope was a lot of discipline, but a lot of fun. And I think I always grew up with that schedule. So then adding in the new component of like the weight, the strength, was like staying very consistent. I would do it 3 times a week. I have I tracked it. And I like that kind of almost challenge of like having to like record something and like keep myself accountable. And I think adding in social media, like that keeps you accountable. Like I'm excited to like go work out because I know I'm going to get content out of it. I know I'm going to get good questions out of it. And I'm still able to, incorporate the jump rope stuff. Like I still do that on my own. I'll come back and help staff and coach, when I'm home, but then I'm also able to incorporate that into my workout. So I'm not just doing, kind of one thing, but I'm kind of getting like the 360 of all fitness.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. We have so much to unpack there, Jaeda. I mean, first, I've never met a competitive jump roper before you. That's incredibly unique. And I literally have sent some of your videos to multiple patients of mine who are like, hey, you said I can start jump roping. Like, do I just like go for it? And I was like, no, you're going to do these. Like, you're going to work up to this. So I really love the creativity that you work into jumping rope. And I really like the backstory behind it. It's really awesome that you're able to kind of find a love and passion for that early on and continue to go along with it for, your entire life so far. And I like how that's kind of evolved a little bit on the fitness side as well. Is you mentioned you're starting to lift more weights, but you're still able to incorporate the jump rope into that. And you're also able to record all that as content for social media. And I think that really creates a very like diverse landscape to your social media feel anyways. It's like, people go to your Instagram or your TikTok and they see you working out, they see you jumping rope, but they also see you traveling, they see you doing lifestyle stuff, they see you going out for brunch. Like it's really just like a really good glimpse into the life of Jaeda Skye Cohen. for lack of a better way to put it, right? Like, and I think that's kind of something that, the rest of us, myself included, could be better about, right? Like, I try and stick in like, hey, I'm just going to post like health stuff or podcast stuff. It's like, well, I could probably post anything and see what happens, right? Like, you can try anything once, and if you post it and it doesn't get the engagement you're looking for, you just don't like the feedback you got about it, like, you don't have to keep posting that stuff. You can always change it and pull to use your term, a 360 and go back to something else.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think there's no harm in trying things out. You can always, pivot and go kind of to the next thing. I think what we were also, talking about hitting on is like kind of, building your personal brand. And I think like that kind of ties into a lot of just posting that stuff. I think, people build a platform off of one niche, and then I think the niche starts to turn into themselves. And I think the best kind of content creators, and I think the best, kind of social media people or presence, I think are the people that you're watching because of that person. You're not really watching because very specific thing. Like, I mean, I could give the example of like Alex Earl now, who, if you're in the kind of the content social media world, like you would know her as just a big influencer, but you're not watching her like she does a lot of, skincare, makeup kind of stuff that she'll talk about. But like, that's not why I watch her stuff. Like, I just think her as a person, like she's entertaining. I think, there's a girl, Anna Sitar, that like started off she did some like kind of specific trendy videos that she was known for, but then now barely posts any of that. And it's more just like her life. And I think that's kind of what I've tried to do, at least with my personal brand. Like, I think it's almost like my brother would always say, like, selling yourself. Like, you're selling like the personality and like the person that someone is wanting to watch. So you could be talking about fitness, you could be talking about traveling, it could be jump rope, it could be being a business owner, being a CEO, working your butt off to try to start this, agency kind of thing. Like, whatever it is, people want to watch you for you. And I think that also ties into the like business part of like, when you're working with someone, like, you want to be working with someone who you enjoy being around and you like that person. Someone could be as top of their field or whatever, but if they're not a good person that you want to be around, then it's a lot harder to want to work with them. I think if you're someone that people really like and want to be around, I think that has gotten me at least a lot like farther in life. I've always said like education, like I wouldn't say I'm like very naturally smart, like things don't just like come to me, but I really know how to work. Like, I think I have a really good work ethic. And so, I could be sitting next to someone. I took a chemistry class, and this chem class was quite hard. And like, the person sitting next to me just, yeah, I barely open the textbook, whatever, gets 97 on the exam. That would not be me. I would be studying, weeks up to it, but then I could also get a 97, or maybe never get to 97, but you get to a 95. And I think that kind of like determination and work ethic is like what's at least helped get me to where I am now, and how to like build up those kind of things. And then I think the other component of it is like this confidence, like the self-confidence part, which I could also get into at some point. But I think like jump rope and that stuff like really helped me. I had my fair share of like bullying issues from that, different bullying issues like in elementary school that I started out with. And I think that all like overcoming those things has really built into the self-confidence that it takes to be putting yourself out there, and like not just filming the stuff, but being able to like push post and take the feedback, take the hate comments, but also take the positive comments.
You get the goods and the bads when you post, and having the confidence to post in the first place is certainly essential. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. And you can even bring up the term like imposter syndrome. Like, people look at, hey, I've got this content, it's really educational, but, I don't feel like I'm qualified to be posting it, or I don't feel like I'm the person to be posting it. Like, there's a huge tie-in, I believe, between like the social media side of things and the mental health side of things. And that goes to both those who are watching and consuming the content versus those who are posting the content, as you kind of brought up there. And it sounds like in your case, the jump rope and the fitness was kind of your outlet for, bullying and issues in the past. And now it sounds like the social media has almost kind of played into that in a way.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think like I've really been able to grow because of that. I think, starting from like the health perspective, like, I mean, that was like from day one, starting in kindergarten. Like, I was definitely someone who grew up, like, I ate a lot healthier than a lot of my friends, which, you wouldn't think is a negative, but when you're eating fruit leather from Trader Joe's and the other person's eating Oreos, you're the one who gets made fun of, not the person eating Oreos. So that definitely started out my issues in elementary school was I had a lot of bullying issues of getting made fun for like the thing like eating healthy or just like I think it just set me apart from other kids, which was a just very bizarre thing to like get made fun of for. But like it really impacted me and kind of like opened my eyes to like those kind of things, I think at a very like young age. And then like being confident, like eventually like I would, talk to therapists in elementary school. I'd be talking to my school counselor because I'd be getting, bullied for like eating these Trader Joe's healthy snacks kind of thing. And I think like that kind of building confidence and then that got tied into jump rope, like, lots of mean comments made about jump rope, lots of little, snarky remarks from kids, people, people would call me Jaeda Jump, at some point, and, wasn't like a funny, nice term. That was definitely a negative, kind of connotation with that. And then I actually turned my Snapchat username. I like made it Jaeda_jump to kind of like try to like just face it and like overcome it. And so I think like a lot of that, and then also performing. Like, I mean, we'd go to these colleges and perform at these halftime shows, and we'd go to UMD, and like I'd have friends there that like were going to watch the game, and I'd be like, great, I'm gonna have to perform in front of these people who were like literally bullying me at school, and like it's hard. Like it really was hard. And so I think that in itself like kind of helped me grow. And I think you can either, succumb to like those mean comments and, just kids being kids and being mean sometimes, or you can grow from that and be like, okay, like I'm doing something that makes me happy. I'm doing something that's good for me, like becoming confident, whether you need help with that. Like, I mean, I've said I was like, I've talked to therapists, I've, been able to like go through that talk therapy stuff, which I think has been really helpful, just having some unbiased, person kind of talk to and be like, what's your opinion? Like, what should I do when people are like making these comments? And I think, working it out and slowly getting more confident, like, yeah, that's what I like doing. Like, what's the problem with it? And then I think, when I started doing the social media stuff, I think that kind of tied into it of like, well, I'm so used to like, I've dealt with my fair share of that stuff. I know what it's like to get those kind of things. And, it worked out. I still like to jump rope. I still like to eat healthy. And, like that didn't get, I don't want to say it didn't get in the way because it did. Like I did, it had like negative consequences, kind of just some like mental health, like, being self-conscious about certain things, but I overcame that. And I think I like overcame it pretty well and built more of a thick skin out of it. And so then, when I started content stuff, I mean, I got my fair share of, judginess and, I lived in my sorority house sophomore year and, when I'm getting packages every day, like working with brands, like you'd think people would be more interested, but you get a lot of judginess out of that. And I think sometimes it's like intimidation or people don't know how to ask about it. And so people just kind of take the mean side of things instead of being curious, which you totally do get really positive people and super excited people to hear about it. But I think you also do get the negative side of things, which I think a lot of people don't talk about. But then I think just having the confidence, like when I first started, I went to New York, I took my tripod and I set up in the middle of Times Square and I was like, I'm going to record 5 TikTok videos in the middle of Times Square and I'm going to build my confidence doing that. And I did it. And, half the people don't even look at you like you're in New York. Like there's other weirder stuff going on than you filming a TikTok video. And then you get some people that come up and be like, oh, are you like an influencer, like whatever, like what's your TikTok? Let me follow you. And there's a new connection. And then you get some people, that there are some people that are looking at you be like, what the heck is this girl doing? But then they look at you for 2 seconds, they walk by, they move on with their day and you move on with yours. Like, it's not like you're doing some awful thing that like is some catastrophe. Like, you can entertain someone or make them think for 30 seconds. And, maybe that inspires them to do something. Maybe that inspires them to, look up that kind of stuff, or maybe they come up and learn something from you. So I think that kind of confidence definitely is a little bit of fake it till you make it. I can't say like every time I hit post, you still get a little bit of that, like, adrenaline rush of like, oh gosh, like positive, but then also negative of like, oh boy. But I think you like start to build that confidence and you have more of an excitement behind it. And you care a little bit less what other people think, especially if it's like a negative perspective. And I think you start to see more of that positive.
Definitely, Jaeda, appreciate your openness and vulnerability on everything. I mean, just to kind of run it back and recap here, I think it's really interesting how people make fun of others that are working on bettering themselves. Like, It's like, really, we're going to bully someone for trying to fight for a better life for themselves, like eating healthy and being active and pursuing their passions. That's not that could get a whole podcast episode in itself, but it's always kind of intrigued me why people do that. And to that point as well, on social media, that kind of negative feedback is going to come about at some point in some way. Maybe it's public comments, maybe it's DMs. Maybe you post something and it just doesn't get interpreted like you want it to. Whatever it is, there's going to be some kind of, negative impact or detriment that comes up at some point. And how you respond to it, I think, is ultimately a testament of your true character first. And second, recognizing that you can't let other people break your stride. Like, it's easy to let someone else kind of ruin your day and kind of create a little bit of a downfall, right? Like, especially in social media, you're trying to cater towards your following and a growing following. And like, you have to post to your audience to a certain extent. So it's like, well, if my audience doesn't like it, then maybe I messed up. Maybe it's on me. But in reality, it's, at least from my standpoint, it's how you respond and how you react and how you continue to better yourself and empower yourself while dealing with those who don't believe. And to the point that you made on, the brands that you work with and the stuff you get delivered and that sort of thing as well, right? Like, there's a lot of people out there who have been on the social media game for a long time and they haven't seen results and they get frustrated by that, right? Like, maybe someone out there's been on Instagram as long as you have and you've got 5 times the amount of followers, or they don't have a brand deal and you've got 10 or whatever it is. Like, sometimes people get a little uneasy and uncomfortable when they're not getting the results that they want. And I've even seen some people in the past where when they're not getting the results, they start to resort to like extreme things and they'll shell out thousands of dollars for like fake accounts to follow them and like their posts and stuff like that. And again, it's 2024. People can figure that stuff out, right? Like, it's time to really be real and authentic about things and stop trying to, buy your way to fame or that sort of thing. So I think it's interesting how many people will openly criticize and critique and, not think twice about what they're saying because it's online, it doesn't count. And it's interesting how quick people are to put down certain people on social media and influencers and that sort of thing, when in reality, like, people on social media are just that. They're people. We're all just people at the end of the day. It's almost like the like clout that you get almost like shades you from society, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's definitely, I think people have a hard time like putting themselves in someone else's shoes. And I think there's a lot of really, really cool perks and like exciting things. And like, for the negative things that come with it, like I wouldn't trade not doing it. Like, I think like it's kind of, I've seen a lot of stuff on TikTok recently about like kind of like influencers and stuff like getting hated on because like people, like influencers will be like, oh, like my life's so hard kind of thing, and people are like, no, it's not, you just get sent packages all day. And I think like there's like so many positive things that like come out of like this kind of world. And like, I mean, I'm not doing this like, full-time kind of thing. Like, I'm still a student and doing it like, as much as I can. But I think being able to like have an audience and being able to like get these opportunities, I'm like super, super grateful for, and I'm like really loving it. I think there's also a lot of work that goes into it that people don't always see. Like, when I have friends that, if I'm doing some kind of collaboration or I'm working with a business and I'm like, hey, you want to tag along? Like, you want to like come with me and like watch? Or, a lot of friends are like, oh, can I like come see what you're doing? Or when I was in London, I'd get invited to like coffee shops to do some content with. And I was like, oh, is it okay if I bring a friend or two? And they're like, yeah, of course. And so I like bring someone, and everyone always says, they're like, oh my God, like I didn't realize like how much you're doing. Like, people think you just take a couple pictures and post it, and then it's like, all right, like let me get paid $100,000 and go do like, and I think there's so much more behind the scenes that people don't realize. I think there's also a ton of great things that come from it. That like, you also have to be, self-aware of like not complaining about certain things when like you're getting to do, these amazing things and you've built these opportunities for yourself. But I think there's also a lot that goes in behind the scenes that people don't see. And it's like really is a 24/7 job if that's what you want to be doing. Like, I've had people talk about, I've talked to a lot of people just like giving advice, kind of like consulting stuff. And they're like, how do I start doing this? And I'm like, just start doing it, you know, and they're like, well, I don't have time to do this stuff and I don't have time to that. And then you see them 2 weeks later and you're like, oh, have you started, like, have you made the page yet? Have you posted your pictures today? And they're like, no, well, like I've had that, like, it's just kind of like a lot of excuses after excuses. And I think to like, at least for me personally, to like be doing all that, like I'm doing, like you really just have to cut out, you know, the excuses and like just start doing. And like it really is 24/7. Like my mind is in content zone like 24/7. And I think a lot of, you know, also the other component, like we were talking about with, you know, kind of the mean comments and that kind of stuff. I think a lot of it, especially being in college, I've realized is like other people's insecurities that they project on you. I've definitely had like, I'm not a big like party or drinker kind of person. I've never really been into that kind of stuff. And like whenever people ask about it, I always make a joke of like, oh, I can have fun without like, you know, drinking. Like I can like go hang out with people and like I can drive you guys, like, you know, like there's benefit for you kind of thing. But I think especially being in college and like being in like some organizations, I think people kind of feel threatened by that and kind of take it out in a mean form instead of being like, you know, I've definitely also had people being like, good for you, like that's amazing that like you can do that kind of thing and like be confident. And like I would totally be very self-conscious, like freshman sophomore year, like very self-conscious about like, you know, people offer you something and I'm like, oh no, I'm good. And it's always like question after question. And you're like, and people, I think like I never want to make someone else feel judged or make someone else feel bad about like what I'm doing. Like I'm like, that's just my choice. And I don't always feel like explaining it. And like I don't really have a, you know, some great explanation about like why I don't like drinking. I'm like, I'm like, I drink enough calories in my like coffee stuff that I'm like, I don't want to add on the alcohol stuff. And I just feel like I'm overall like a fun, positive person that I feel like can match people's energy. And I'm like, if I don't need that kind of stuff, like I want to be able to get up early on a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and go work with a coffee shop and do content. I don't want to be, you know, hungover from whatever the night before kind of thing. And so I think a lot of that like has taken a lot of confidence too, like being able to like say confidently, like, oh no, like I'm not into that, or instead of making up an excuse of like, I used to say like, oh, I have like an exam tomorrow morning, or like, oh, I have to like drive here tomorrow morning. Like I can't, like I'd make up these like excuses that like weren't even true, just to like have a reason to like say no. And now I'm like, no, just not into it. Like, I don't need it. Like, I'm good. I'm, you know. And so I think like that kind of stuff, like learning how people perceive that and like learning how you also want to come across and like, you know, better yourself in the right way, I think has also been a learning curve. And I think also like teaches you how to handle yourself just in real life, but also, you know, on social media and like being confident for what you want to do. And, you know, I think I also had a lot of, you know, kind of like mentally like feeling, I don't know the right word for it, but like if I'm, you know, working on my business, like I'm working on a media agency and I'm taking my Saturday night and like, yeah, I'm also staying up till, you know, 2 a.m. like all these other college students, but I'm working on like a business and I'm like, like these people like are all doing stuff and I'm like I would say I'm not a typical college student. And I feel like I'm like, I have to be doing these things that other college students are to be like having fun as a college student. But I'm like, just because I have a different like priority list and I have a different kind of agenda to achieve and different goals for myself doesn't mean that like that's any less okay than what other people are doing. And if you want to, you know, go out and do something else, like that's totally okay too. And we just, you know, it's different priorities and different kind of agendas. And so I think it took me a while to like be confident and like not have that like, you know, almost like present regret of like, am I gonna like regret doing this? But I'm like, no, like I don't even want to be doing that. Like I'd rather be doing this and like I'm excited about this and like I'm not missing out by not doing that. I just have different excitement for different things right now. And so I think that's also been a big learning curve part of it. And also like tying into social media and like having time to film and edit and stuff and just kind of different priorities than I think some of my like other peers would have.
It's so funny, as you were talking in my head, I kept drawing parallels to where I was a few years ago when I was in college. And I was like, well, let's see, I was starting the podcast, I was starting the business, I was doing all these things. I was like, yeah, I can relate to a lot of those things, right? And it's difficult in the moment when you're putting in all the work, you're getting some of the criticism, you know, you're not going out on the weekends, you're not like living in the moment, I think was the term that people liked when I was in college. You weren't doing that. You're kind of bought into this like delayed gratification concept. We talk about it all the time in fitness, but we can apply it to social media and business and branding, podcast, whatever that way too, right? Like you put in the work today, but you don't see the results until, 6 months from now or a year from now. And I found myself in a similar spot where I started the podcast without a plan, just started it on a whim and just kept it going. Had no idea what I was doing, still have no idea what the hell I'm doing half the time. But we're figuring it out as we go. It's like you jump off like a cliff and build an airplane on a way down, for lack of a better way to put it. And as you're figuring it out, things start to snowball and things start to build, and people kind of jump on board and you kind of find yourself as you go. And similar to you, there's been a lot of opportunities that I was presented with way younger than I should have been, and like really unqualified for, but it was really cool to be in that moment, doing those things that, like, I definitely shouldn't have been doing at the age I'm at, or the lack of qualifications, or sometimes without even having a doctorate degree, people were like, hey, I'll talk with you, or I'll jump on a podcast with you, that sort of thing. So it's interesting to me how, again, we like to criticize those who are, busy and active in pursuing, what they feel is the direction for them, or, pursuing those bigger goals and higher ground of life. When in reality, give it enough time, and give it enough time to just throwing stuff against the wall. Eventually something's going to stick, and eventually you're going to get to where you want to be. And I mean, it certainly seems like you're doing just that, Jaeda. I mean, you're already miles ahead of me, probably even further than that on social media. And, you're literally like 5 years younger than me. Like, the whole world is your oyster at this point, right? Like, and that's not to say that like age is a huge factor in social media, right? Like, there's people I know who are in their 40s on social media and absolutely killing it. And it's like that could be you, right? Like, if you're listening, like, you don't have to be like, 21 years old, 22 years old, college kid or young adult, like trying to make it on social media. Like, you can make it at any age. And, the whole term of make it looks different for people too on social media, right? Like, maybe you have like a certain number of followers you want to get to, or maybe your goal is like an income goal, or maybe your goal is a little bit more like mine, where it's like, hey, look, I don't care what the number is at the end of the day. If I just benefit one person in a positive way, at least one person a day, then I'm checking the box and calling it a good day, right? Like, we think about that in terms of how we go about our day to day. Like, hey, I'm just going to have a positive impact on someone today. Well, social media allows us to like expand our horizons with that and offer those, positive impacts or value or whatever to people anywhere in the world. And I'm just like, look, if I can just do that for one person every day, my day is a check and I'm moving on. So,
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we got that 360 view, as I keep saying, kind of covered. But I really agree with that last point. I think you really have to think about what the intention is. And a lot of times when I work with different businesses or brands, that's a lot of the first conversation of like, what's your goal? Because not everyone's goal is 1 million followers. I'd say like my goal isn't 1 million followers kind of thing. Like, yeah, that'd be cool. I feel like a lot of people would say like, yeah, that's cool. But I think a lot of also, why I'm personally doing a lot of the stuff that I actually just made a TikTok about the other day was like, I think a lot of also what I'm doing, like I'm working on starting a media agency. Well, I guess I started it. I keep saying working on it, which is still work in progress, but it has started, is kind of to show, my abilities. And like when I'm even like applying to different places, I feel like a lot of different jobs, like you have this like clear cut resume. And I think, there's marketing students who are applying for the social media stuff, and, they have this on paper marketing things. These are the textbook things I learned. And while I think, it's great to have that kind of education, I think the real benefit is like this hands-on stuff. Like, have you ever posted something? Have you ever made something? Have you ever built a following? Like, I can take my social media and I could be like, here's a following that I built from scratch. And like, I engaged these people. I worked with all these businesses and brands of like my own, just kind of like determination building it up. And so I think people always just think like the goal is some follower count. And I think a lot of times people have other intentions behind it. And I think a lot of, for me, my intentions is like, it's almost like a resume. As much as it's my digital diary, it's also a resume. And being like, here's like these people that I've engaged, here's this content that I've created. So like when I go to a business and I'm like, hey, I want to like help you with your TikTok and, tell you kind of what to create or make you a content schedule kind of thing. And they're like, why would we trust you? I'm like, well, they already know me for my personal brand. My first client that I got for my media agency, when I like kind of pitched myself to them, they were like, I started like explaining what I do, and they're like, we know that. And I'm just like, the heck? I'm like, how do you know that? And they're like, we like follow you on Instagram. And I like looked and I was like, oh my God, this place has been following me on Instagram. And it was so awkward. I was like, I don't even follow them back. I was like, let me follow them back real quick. But I was like, it was like they like knew me from my own stuff. And they were like, oh yeah, no, like you're like, like we just want your help because we know what you've personally done. If I had no social media presence and I was just coming in there and being like, hey, I'm starting this agency as like I don't know, a marketing student or a digital design student or something like that, they'd be like, well, why would I trust you? Yeah, you've taken these classes, or yeah, you've gotten these certifications, but like, what can you actually do? And I'm like, here's my following of X amount of followers. Here's all the things I've done. Here's the brands that I've worked with. And they already knew that because they've been following me. And they're like, oh yeah, we actually have been like saving your content and actually like using that as inspiration already. So like, it was just like such a cool, like 360 again, kind of like full circle moment that I was like, all these things that I've been working on, like got me my first client with like barely any questions, which is like, yeah, we know what you can do. Like, where can we sign? So it was just like super, super cool seeing that. And so I think that's also part of the intention behind it, and not just like, let me get as many followers as I can. Like, let me get really good quality stuff. And so then when I have a reason to be pitching myself to someone, I have this portfolio that I can show someone. And so I think other people probably have similar intentions, but I think like, for anyone like interested in, starting social media or working on their social media, like to not get discouraged about that kind of stuff, because, now there's a whole world of UGC content, which is user generated content. Like brands are hiring these UGC people with, you can have 0 followers, but if you have a portfolio to show like what you've done and actual content that you've created, like that's something that people want too. So I think there's a lot of different angles to take besides just like, let me get 1 million followers. And like, then, once you get there, then like, you just like have next goal. I think like figuring out different intentions, which doesn't have to be just like a straight line path of like 0 to 1 million followers kind of thing. But here are other goals that I have in different ways that I want to kind of make it happen and use to my advantage, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Jaeda, it really seems like you're like the queen of the social media world. And you've mentioned a number of times that, a lot of brands are starting to work with you and you have your own agency to help with that. For brands listening or anyone listening who, wants to start working with you on that sort of thing, since that really seems to be your specialty, how can they get involved with you and what kind of things are you able to do for them?
Yeah, so my social media, I mean, is usually the first stop of connecting with me. So I think I said at the beginning, but my username is Jaeda_Skye on basically everything. And then I have my own website, which is just jadaskye.com. And then working the media agency website is a work in progress, but right now on my personal website, I have my media tab just at the top. I think it says Jaeda Skye Media. And you could fill out kind of an interest form on there to see like what I could help you with, what your business goals are. Are you looking for content creation? Are you looking for, web development? Are you looking for just strategy planning? Are you just looking for someone to consult with and be like, what the heck do I do? Like, how do I do this stuff? I've worked with brands that have a huge following that know exactly what they're doing and they just want help. They're just like, I don't have time to create this content. But then I've worked with other people, I just started working with this restaurant and, she's, is much older than me and is like, I don't want to download Instagram. I don't want to touch Instagram. I don't even know what TikTok is, but I just want to know like, what do I do to get in that field? And I just need someone to consult with me and tell me what it is. How do I do it? How can I, you could find me someone who could then do it for me kind of thing. So again, full circle kind of different things that can be accomplished. And basically I feel like anything that you would want or a business would want, in that scheme or field, I'd be your person. So there's that interest form on there, and then just connecting. There's a contact, connected with me on my actual website, but then also just, if you're someone who just has questions, like shoot me a DM me on Instagram, DM me on TikTok, send me an email. Like I love talking about this stuff. And I'm super excited with like, the whole media agency and just excited to keep letting that grow and keep building that and make new connections. And so I'm just excited about all of it.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the sky's the limit, Jaeda.
Funny, good one. Yeah, that's actually the course that I'm creating. I'm creating
Really?
a social media content course, which that's another thing that if people are interested in, basically, I guess everything that I said today, but broken down and much more step by step. And I've been making templates and kind of like workbooks for people to use and kind of follow along to, like I said, I like to hold myself accountable and, have like a physical thing to be, working on. So I'm creating all that stuff. That is also on the website. There's an interest form of that to be able to fill out just your information. So then I can send you more details when that launches. And the course is actually called Sky's the Limit. So that's like social media content course with Jaeda Skye.
That is amazing. We will link to all of that below. Jaeda, I feel like we covered so many different topics today. Is there anything we missed or anything else that you wanted to bring up today?
I think we basically covered everything. I feel like for anyone listening, just to stay with, and I always say, like, social media can be a sprint. You can have a video blow up overnight, but if you're in it for the long run, I think social media is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think there's high moments, there's low moments, there's everything in between. But I think being confident in yourself, and just being confident in your abilities, and even if you have to fake it till you make it kind of thing, like, just stick with it. And I feel like have fun with it. I feel like that's also the other part. Like, people, I think, make it very serious sometimes, and people want to watch content where someone's having fun and really enjoying what they're doing. And I think that's something that I've always incorporated. Like, I love this stuff, and I think that's how I'm able to do it 24/7 and why I don't have any like burnout from it. I think, do something that you're passionate with, because you'll be successful at something that you're passionate about. So that's my, I guess, like, quick sum up advice, and take opportunities. Definitely, like, just say yes to things and try things out. And if you fail, that's a learning experience, and get back up and try something else.
Jaeda, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. If you liked this episode, please make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, and leave a review. This way we can spread knowledge and motivation and help reach more people. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.